JB, we've got a college that we began with earlier in the season after they beat your school pretty handily. We won't go too deep into that, obviously, but they really did come
Yeah.
onto our map at that point in time. And, to beat Wesley, which is a team that has just the utmost respect across the country for a variety of reasons, the way they did yesterday, we wanted to feature them one more time here as they prepare for a big showdown against Del Val in the quarterfinals this coming Saturday. So, without further ado, let's introduce our next guest.
Yep. From Brockport, we would like to welcome Coach Jason Mangone onto In the Huddle.
Coach, how are you?
I'm doing well. How you guys doing?
We're fearing the beard right now. Is I think what we're doing. That's a
He's
great beard.
winning No Shave Movember, man. He's winning it.
Been no shave since
Like
March, so we're hanging on for this with for a little while longer.
8 months long,
Yep.
and boy, I gotta tell you, if I didn't shave for 8 months, it would be even worse than that, or better than that, I guess is maybe the way to look at it. But hey, don't change a thing because things are going really well for you. I want to ask you about the game flow yesterday first before we dive into the rest of the season and what's coming up here. There was a point in the game where you're up 21-7 in the second quarter, and I looked down and suddenly it's 21-21, kind of close to halftime. You didn't have probably full chance to talk to your team until you got into the locker room. Tell me, what did you say to your team after that 14-point lead disappeared so that you come back out and score basically 14 points straight on a quick offensive possession and a quick defensive, I think it was pick six at that point in time. What was the magic
Big guy
there?
touchdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nothing. Nothing profound, but we've been a pretty steady team all year, and our guys have shown great resilience all season. We were down at the half at Cortland, I believe 28-17, and the kids handled themselves really well at halftime, and just go over the adjustments, what's going well, what we anticipate they're going to do in the second half, and ultimately what we have to do to execute better. But there was no panic. We knew Wesley was an outstanding football team. They don't go 13 years in a row to the NCAA playoffs and the Sweet 16 for nothing. So we knew we were not going to just necessarily run away with the game. So we just kind of had to steady ourselves, regroup, and come out and play good football.
And you sure did. At the second half, it was kind of an explosion on a number of different levels. I mean, you guys score both offensively, defensively pretty quick. And part of your job as a head coach is, at the half, you have to, fire guys up. But, all of a sudden you have some good luck here in the third quarter. How do you keep, the guys from getting either too confident or kind of too riled up, I guess you could say, considering, you still had a pretty big chunk of the second half left?
Yeah, we came out and had a decent drive on offense and scored to go up 28-21. And then we had a fumble or a pick six and then a fumble recovery for a touchdown. And so now we leave the field as an offense up 7, and all of a sudden now we're up 21. And then again, Wesley is as good as advertised, right? So they came down and scored. So now there's been 3 touchdowns since we had left the field. But our guys were excited to go back out there as an offense, and we actually had a few rough patches there. Their defense is pretty stout, really good against the pass and the run, and we struggled for 2 possessions. And our defense, though, was outstanding, not only from day one in camp in our first game, but yesterday they proved once again that they were ready to step up against a big challenge.
Coach, let's talk about one of your biggest weapons from day one of this season that we talked to twice so far this season. Joe Germinario is a prolific quarterback in terms of numbers. I think he was over 320 yards between passing and rushing yesterday, and no interceptions in a game where he's facing a tremendous defense, obviously, in Wesley. That's been their bread and butter throughout this season. What did you see in Joe? Because we talked to him earlier in the season, and it sounded like not necessarily too many schools are willing to take the risk on him at quarterback. Maybe because of his size or a variety of other reasons. But what did you see in him that led you to believe he could be this good ultimately? And I'm going to guess that this was probably one of your best decisions of the season, or of the last couple seasons at least, putting him in there. Tell us about your thoughts on Joe.
Yeah, well, so the coach that was actually on the road recruiting Joe had him as a safety. And when we, as a staff, evaluated him, the beginning half of his film is all quarterback, of him running around, making throws on the run from the pocket. And basically my jaw dropped. And we all started laughing to a point where, why aren't we grading him as a quarterback? Because guys like him don't come around very often. And then, he ended up going to the University of Albany. So, unfortunately we didn't get him, but at the same time, we don't got to play against him. And then, for him to call after he got his release from Albany in the summer going into last season, when I heard Germanario, the name on the phone, instantly took me back to that day with watching his film as a group, and got very excited. And he's been everything we've expected him to be. No offense to anybody else, whoever graded him as anything but a quarterback, should question how they're looking at quarterbacks, I suppose.
Yeah, we have Coach Jason Mangone here in the Huddle, Brockport head coach. Go ahead, JB. Sorry about that.
Well, it's funny because during the broadcast of the game, there was some of the announcers were mentioning, the fact that he has the size of a safety or linebacker type of guy, and he's certainly tall. He's got the arm. But one of the plays that I thought were pretty interesting, if you could kind of shed some light on, I noticed you guys like to run Brown in the Wildcat formation a few times. You guys scored a couple touchdowns. One of them, which I think Tristan literally jumped over another guy, like leaped over him like a high jumper. It was an amazing play. Was that something that you guys installed specifically for this game, or is that something, we've seen some Brockport games throughout the season, but I noticed that it came out a pretty good amount, and it was pretty darn effective for you.
Yeah. First, we want to get the ball in Tyree's hands as much as possible. I think he has made a lot of statements now with his ability of how good he is, and when the ball's in his hands, usually special things occur. So we're going to put him at slot receiver. We're going to put him at tailback. We've had him at quarterback, and then now in the Wildcat in our short yardage. We're just trying to do a few little small wrinkles here and there. And again, going back to Wesley's defense, how good they are and how big they are. We went a little more beef, so we put a few D linemen in the backfield and had a few schemes going, and really just let Tyree be Tyree. Sometimes the best coaching is little coaching, and just give Tyree the direction and let him go, and oftentimes he'll find a way into the end zone.
For as good as the Wesley defense is, there was a team that beat them earlier in the season in week 1. That was Del Val, and they played like a number 1 seed all season long, rarely in trouble throughout the season. Maybe one game where they sort of underperformed early but pulled it out late. This team is probably as good of a defensive team as I've seen in the East region in quite some time, although Frostburg State's trying to step up there and say me too, and so is Brockport for that matter. But this is a tough game coming up. I was talking to you beforehand. I'm suggesting I see a low-scoring defensive battle here to a certain degree. Tell us what you see in this Del Val team from what you've seen so far. Obviously, this is Sunday, but if I know coaches as well as we tend to hear, you've already been looking at this tape a little bit. Tell us about this Del Val team, something maybe we don't know about them or wouldn't see just from watching a little bit of the games we see on Saturdays.
Yeah, well, the first thing that pops out to you is some of their size, and really in the back end, right? So they got, I think, a safety and an outside backer that are, I believe, listed as 6'3", 220 plus, 230 plus, and you don't often see guys that size playing a high safety, and kind of a hybrid outside backer, strong safety position. They have a 200, I believe, 60-pound middle linebacker, which is again a big boy, right? So. They have great size. They're a 3-4 defense, somewhat similar to ourselves. We haven't faced a 3-4 all that much this year, so that's going to be fun to kind of go back to some things we did in camp and get ready for those guys. But they fly to the ball. They're very good in coverage from what we've seen, and they have flat out just dominated defensively. I think giving up 8 points a game. So we're going to have our hands full offensively. But their size in the back end, at least initially, pops out to us.
Yeah, and I would also think that sort of on the flip side, Coach, when you look at their offense, I mean, Darden can be a pretty elusive quarterback. He's kind of like Joe in that he's got good feet. So even if you do get pressure on him, he can beat you with the run or the pass. So Have you guys faced an offense similar to Del Val, other than you mentioned some of the the size considerations and all that? But is this an offense that's like, wow, we've never seen something like this before? Is it okay? We kind of know what we're dealing with here. Now we just have to execute.
Yeah, well, I think I have a lot of pride in being the Empire 8 conference and facing a lot of creative offensive coordinators that we face week in and week out. So, not everybody necessarily puts up 40 points a game like Del Valle, but there is creativity and dual threat guys. So, Ferrara from Portland, the senior quarterback, he is outstanding. In the first half, which was probably our worst half of football defensively, they converted 3 third and 20 pluses, which doesn't happen very often, right? So you're lucky if you get one of those as an offensive game, let alone 3 in 1/2. And I'm not saying that is what attributed to the only reason why they scored points, but he's a dual threat guy. And so he was probably the best dual threat guy we faced all year, and until maybe this coming weekend where, we'll have our hands full with him.
Coach, coming into the season, did you see this team as, let's say, 12-0 material, your own team, that is? There are some people that, and I ran into a couple players in the upstate New York area toward the eastern side where I work out a couple of seasons ago, and they were telling me kind of about the new feel at Brockport, that this was going to be a team that was going to be on the fly. And I've been watching, and yeah, it was obviously an upward trajectory going on, but I didn't see this coming necessarily, and no offense, but this is just kind of out of nowhere to a lot of people, where you have an Alfred team last year that looked like a really strong team, but they weren't nearly the same team that we thought they were this season, it felt like at times, though they did challenge you in that game, no doubt. But, I mean, what is the ingredient here that caused this team to go from upper medium team to holy cow, what is going on here, team, do you think?
Well, I think the most obvious answer and kind of what we've pride ourselves on is recruiting, right? So every team obviously wants to have the best players. And if Monday through Friday is very competitive, you have ultimately a great chance to succeed on Saturday. But we have tried to amass great people, great players, great competitors in our program. And I think the biggest part of the formula for us is that we have 23 seniors, right? So I believe 9 of which start. So not every one of them is a starter, but they all contribute, whether it be as a reserve guy, whether it be as a scout team guy, but they ultimately all provide leadership. They've been with us since the beginning. So had the opportunity to take over in 2013, and we haven't had big senior classes. So we've had some talent, but when you only have 10 seniors in years past and you're relying on your freshmen and sophomores ultimately to win games, that's why we've struggled with finishing. And because now those freshmen and sophomores are looking to the seniors and saying, listen, you got to lead us, but only a handful of seniors are really playing. Whereas now we're probably playing 15 of those seniors throughout a game, if not more, and they're providing the leadership. So again, just by having seniors doesn't ultimately make you good, but when you have talented seniors, that obviously makes you have a good chance to be successful.
Speaking of talent and leadership, the broadcasters of the game yesterday at the end, when you guys were lining up and shaking the hands of the Wolverines, talked a lot about the alumni at Brockport. And it was, I think, 15 years ago that the Golden Eagles went to the quarterfinals to play John Carroll in a tough game. I imagine you probably have heard from these past leaders of the team. What kind of messages have they been sending to you guys and the team during this run? Have they recently reached out? Did seem like something that the announcers were really stressing on, how the alumni have really enjoyed this year, especially.
Yeah, it's been great. We've been inundated with tons of email, texts, messages from our alumni from what we refer to as our Gray Eagles in the 60s and 70s, which I have a grouping of guys that come back to a lot of our home games, come back to our alumni golf tournament, and they do separate gatherings as well. To the guys that did play in the late 80s, early 90s, when success began a little bit here in our program, to when we run those playoffs, the 4 years from 2000 to 03. And heard from a lot of guys in 02, which is the team that made it to play John Carroll in the Elite Eight that you referred to, and they're having a lot of fun with it, right? So now there's some guys talking to each other that may have lost touch a tiny bit, with life getting in the way, right, with kids and whatnot, that now are kind of rekindling some of those friendships because they're enjoying the ride that we're on and hopefully living vicariously through us and enjoying, remember, going back to those days that they played in the Elite Eight. And, people forget, too, how outstanding our defense was under Rocco Salamo in those years. And if people like Candelo, I can watch it now. I was on the sideline. I was the receivers and quarterbacks coach then and made a sack on the 4-yard line with less than 20 seconds, tie game, and we have a field goal to win it, and we get it blocked and went to overtime loss. And we had a chance to go to the Final Four that year. And, it was a great run, but we had a chance to make that even better.
Coach, we don't want to keep you too long here because we want to let you get ready for the chance to go to the Final Four here. And, thanks in part to the committee giving the East region its own little quadrant down there. We know somebody's going to go to the Final Four from the East. We may get two. It's not impossible if Frostburg does something against Mount Union. It'll be tough, obviously, but they are quite a special team as well. Maybe it's a good thing they're on the other side of that bracket right now for all the East Quadrant teams down there.
Yeah,
but nonetheless, it's going to be impressive. It's going to be an exciting weekend for us to watch 2 of the 4 games really involve teams that we've kind of grown up with here throughout the season. But we want to give you a chance for shout-outs, but I had to give one shout-out to Steve Potter, who is, I believe, at least in name, the offensive coordinator for your team, though I know you're quite involved with all aspects of the game at your team. But Steve has been a great friend of ours throughout this season, checking in with us, and we've been really blessed to have a lot of Brockport fans join us throughout this season after our Joe Germanario interview, number 1 and number 2 for that matter. So we want to give shout-outs to everybody over there in Brockport, especially to Steve. Go ahead, your turn. I know it's that time of year where family starts to say, hey, when are you going to be home more? But at the same time, you don't want to see this run end. So go ahead, give shout-outs to who you have to.
Yeah, well, I'll start with my wife and my kids, right? So, again, my wife, Janine, my sons, Brendan and Evan, who, have been awesome because, like you said, unfortunately not home all that much. But all the guys here on our roster, we have great kids, more importantly than just great players on our program. My staff, who have been phenomenal, including Coach Potter, Coach Fox, and all the guys who have done a tremendous job of making this season what it is. And all of our alumni and fans. So we have already, I've been reached out by a lot of people. Where are we staying? What hotel? Because they're coming. So we're going to have a great turnout on Saturday, and we're fortunate for that. And really a shout out to you two guys, right? So I know we haven't conversed before, but what you guys do for East Region football, and we pay attention. I listen to your podcast on my way home. I'm a half hour from here, so I enjoy my downtime and listen to you guys and really appreciate what you do for D3 football in general in the East region. Thank you.
I'm hoping to get out there for the game on Saturday. In fact, Doylestown is not that far away from New York City, and that's where I'll be basing myself this weekend. So I'm excited to see this game, to say the least. JB will be down there watching this game and the Frostburg game as well, I'm sure. But we are obviously rooting not for either team. We can't do that when it comes to East versus East. We might be rooting for one in the other game. I guess we're allowed to in that case. But what we are rooting for is a great game, injury-free, where these two teams play the best football possible and give some entertainment throughout the country and hopefully a great result for whoever does come out and pull it out. But, Coach, thank you for your time here and for having such a great and respectful team. Because they've been great with us as well. So thanks for everything, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
JB, we're going to have more content throughout the week, as folks know. We're going to probably have a Frostburg player at some point during the week, so check back here on the In the Huddle Facebook page. And thanks, folks, for joining us.